Hello everyone, welcome to my channel Study Management. In this video, we will be studying about research process. The first and foremost step in research is formulation of a research problem. Without identifying a problem, research cannot proceed. So therefore, a researcher must first decide his general area of interest or any one aspect of a subject matter that he would like to inquire into. Once the researcher has identified his area of interest and has formulated the research problem, the research problem should be then expressed in the form of research questions. For example, if you are interested to make a study on obesity in children, then the possible research question can be, what are the causes of obesity in children? Suppose you're interested to do a research on students who are addicted to social media, the research question can be, what is the impact of social media on students? If you are eager to make a research on stress in working women, you can develop a research question as, what are the effects of stress on the health of working women? As formulation of research problem is a very important and crucial stage in the entire research process, it is always advisable for a researcher to discuss the research problem with those having expertise in the topic selected for the study. Once the research problem is identified and the research questions are framed, the next important step is review of literature. The researcher must review the literature related to the topic selected for the study. A critical review of the available literature familiarizes the researcher about the studies that have already been conducted in the past, how these studies were conducted, what were the research methods adopted, and what were the findings of those studies. For example, if you are making a study on the causes of obesity in children, studies in the past will give you a detailed picture about the statistics related to the long-term effects of childhood obesity in different countries. The researcher can gather the related articles from various sources such as journals, books, PhD theses, and government reports. The literature elicited and reviewed by the researcher from various resources will enable him to identify the research gap, that is, the areas in which the studies that which are not yet made and that which can be addressed in the future study. The third important step in research is development of hypothesis. Hypothesis is a tentative answer to a question which you have in your mind before you even start the research. It is a preconceived result that you have already assumed in your mind before the actual research process. For example, you may have the assumption that students who take tuitions perform better than the others who do not take tuitions. It is always important to state the hypothesis before conducting the study, as it provides a direction to the researcher and helps to test whether the hypothesis is true or false. The two most commonly used hypotheses by most of the researchers are null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Null hypothesis is also called as a working hypothesis because it is treated as a base of the study. Null hypothesis is denoted by H0. Null hypothesis signifies that there is no relation or no difference between two variables. For example, there is no relation between the performance of students and extra coaching classes. Another example for null hypothesis is there is no difference between the effect of vaccination A and vaccination B for COVID-19. Alternative hypothesis is the opposite of the null hypothesis. Alternative hypothesis is considered to be true if the null hypothesis is rejected. Here there is an example which is the opposite of the H0 statement. There is a relation between the performance of students and extra coaching classes. And the second example, there is a difference between the effectiveness of vaccination A and vaccination B for COVID-19. The next step in research is forming research design. Research design specifies the method of conducting research. It is a well-defined plan of action. A research design generally includes the nature and purpose of the study, location where the study would be conducted, nature of the data required, sources from where the data would be gathered, method for analysis of data, and the time duration for the completion of the study. Take for example, if you're interested to make a study on the effect of vaccination for COVID-19 on people in India, for an individual researcher, it is not possible to make such a huge study as it involves lot of time and cost. In such cases, framing a research design will help the researcher to narrow down the study. For example, you can make a study on the effect of vaccination in a particular state by selecting a specific region, say study in Karnataka, particularly coastal Karnataka region comprising of two districts, Udupi and Dakshina Kannada. You can further narrow down your study by focusing only on a specific age category, that is, effect of COVID-19 vaccination on people belonging to the age group 45 and above. This will give you an idea about the nature of the data that you are going to collect for your research study. Further, you can also decide the time duration within which you would be completing your study, say 1 year. Thus, research design will give you a clear idea about what your study is and how you're going to carry your research work. The next important step in research is determining the sample size. Sample is a subset of the population. In research, it is not always possible to gather data from the entire population. Data is generally collected from the sample that represents the entire population. For example, if you want to study the impact of TV advertisements on children residing in Mangalore city, the target population for this particular study will be the total number of children of the age group 2 to 12 years residing in Mangalore city, that is 20,000 children. And the sample for this study will be 1,000 children of the age group 2 to 12 years residing in Mangalore city. The sample for the population should be selected systematically. There are different methods for selecting the sample, which will be discussed in detail in a separate video. Once the sample size for the study is determined, the next step is collection of the data. Generally, there are two types of data. The first type of data is primary data. Primary data is the original data which is collected for the first time for a specific purpose. Different kinds of sources through which primary data are collected are observation. For example, observing the behavior of customers towards a particular product displayed in the supermarket for sale. The second type of source is questionnaires, issuing questionnaires that comprise a list of questions which the respondent should answer. The third type of primary data collection source is conducting face-to-face interviews, and the fourth commonly type of source of primary data is focus group sessions. It is a method of gathering the data in which a group of people discuss and give their viewpoints on a particular topic. The second type of data is secondary data. Secondary data are those which have already been collected and used by some other person or institution. Some of the common examples of secondary data are reports published by international organizations like World Health Organization, United Nations organizations, etc. Government publications, journals and newspapers, research articles, reports of business organizations and financial institutions are some of the sources through which secondary data can be collected. Once the data is collected from the relevant sources, the next step is analysis and interpretation of data. The data collected should be first fed into the computer using the Microsoft Excel for processing the data. The first stage in data processing is editing, wherein the data is carefully examined to identify any errors or omissions. The next step is coding. Here, the data is categorized into groups based on its features. Once the coding is done, the data is classified into different groups based on their similarities and dissimilarities. Finally, tabulation. It is summarizing the data in rows and columns. The processed data can now be analyzed using different kinds of software programs. The most common kind of software program which is used by most of the researchers is SPSS. Now, finally, the analyzed data can be presented in the form of graphs and charts. Once the researcher analyzes and interprets the data, the next step in research is testing the hypothesis. Hypothesis testing refers to the formal procedures that are used by the researcher to accept or reject the statistical hypothesis. Some of the popular statistical tests which are generally used by the researchers are chi-square test, t-test, and ANOVA. Testing of hypothesis will result in contribution to the existing theory or generation of a new theory. Once the researcher tests the hypothesis, he interprets the results based on the hypothesis and then gives his findings and conclusion for his study. Conclusions are the most vital outcomes of the study. On the basis of findings of the research work done, we draw inferences about the phenomenon under study. The results obtained from the analysis of the data are to be interpreted skillfully. The researcher should be very careful while interpreting the results. A wrong interpretation may lead to wrong decisions. Findings of a study help in developing new theories and can suggest new research problems to be explored in future. The last step in research is report writing. A report is a summary of the whole research process. Research report can be in the form of research papers that are written for presentation in conferences and seminars. It can also be in the form of PhD theses, which is submitted for the award of PhD degree. It can also be in the form of research articles that are written for publications in journals. Generally, a report comprises of three different sections. The first section is known as the preliminary section, and it includes pages such as title of the study, abstract, declaration, acknowledgement, table of contents, and so on. It is basically an introductory section. The second section is the main text. This is the most important part of the research report. It carries important information with regard to the topic of the study, introduction, methodology adopted in the study, and the statements of findings, conclusions, and recommendations. The final section of the research report is known as the end matter. This includes references comprising of the list of resources such as books, journal articles, bulletins which are used for the study. It also includes another page known as the appendix that may include the questionnaire which is used for gathering information from the respondents. I hope you enjoyed watching my video. Thanks for watching. Please stay tuned to my channel for more updates on research.